Hey guys. Okay, I was so jazzed when they asked me to, come talk about dating because there's not a better sport on the planet. No, seriously. How many of you love dating? One, two. Have y'all met? Seriously, two people? Thank you. Three. I see a hand. Seriously, is it that depressing, the whole day? Yes. Okay. Well, we're going to go into hopefully a lot of Q&A about that because I want to hear from you, and I think that you've got obviously it sounds like some at least questions, maybe not so happy feelings about dating. I thought it was so much fun. In fact, when my wife and I got married, we said the worst thing about this married thing is you can't date anymore. We were trying to work out a deal, but it never been. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to give you a few kind of things to think about in the beginning, and tell a story about my journey into talking about dating. When I was a little boy, I never sat there and dreamt, God, one day I'd love to be a dating coach. I ended up writing a book called How to Get a Date Worth Keeping. And that wasn't my life goal. But here's what happened. I think I first became aware of this problem. I was doing a radio show, a call-in, and a lady called in, and there have been a few calls about dating. So I started about dating, and it was on a Christian talk show. And this lady calls in, and she said, well, I can't believe you're a Christian and you're talking about dating. And I said, why? And she said, because that's not the biblical way to find a spouse. I said, oh, there's a biblical way? She says, yes, God always brings the man to the woman. That's what he does. She said, that's the biblical way. I said, well, I don't know. If you want the biblical way, you might go start a war and grab a bunch of them and take them home, or you might buy one from her old man, and then you get one thrown in on the side. And there's a lot of biblical stories about how this happens, so don't tell me that's the biblical way. She says, no, I am trusting the Lord to bring me my husband. I said, well, that's a great thing. I do think we need to trust God in life. And she said, my Lord, I don't have to date. My Lord will bring him to me. And I said, well, what does that exactly that mean? She said, I trust God to bring me my husband. And I said, well, do you have to do anything? She said, I'm trusting the Lord. I said, do you have to go outside? She said, I'm trusting the Lord. He will bring it. I said, do you think he's going to bring him to your door? Seriously, this is a real call. She said, I trust the Lord so much that he will choose him and bring him to my door. I said, lady, if you don't want to marry the FedEx guy or a Jehovah's Witness, you better go outside. And that's the first time I kind of became aware of that there was this theology out there. And I want to start really with a little bit about theology. That is not what the Bible says at all, and that's not the created order. I trusted God for Tori. And I remember Matthew 6:33, where it says, seek God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And then he's talking about don't worry. And where is this going to come from? Where did this come from? And he said, look at the birds of the air. God feeds them. But he doesn't bring the bugs to the nest. They got to get out of the nest and go fly to where the bugs are. And they've also got to be able to fly. And so what we're going to do is take a little bit look at, the reason I entitled the book, and I'll tell you how that came about, How to Get a Date Worth Keeping, because when I started to study this problem, and that's how I end up being, talking about dating, this would have been in the early thousands. I was out speaking on just stuff that I speak on. And every time I would go talk, it'd be a different city, a different state. 2 women, 3 women maybe, would come up afterwards and say, can we ask you a question? Now, I don't know if women always do that. They go ask the question together, like they go to the bathroom and then they come ask the question. But it was always like 2 or 3 of them. And the question, and I'm not kidding, city after city, 2 or 3 women, mid to late 20s, 30s, mid-30s, they would come up and say, we have a question. I'd say, what? And they'd say, why aren't we dating? I go, I don't know why you're not dating. Do you want to be dating? And they go, yeah, we want to, but it's just not happening, and we're not. And so I go, I don't know. It's not my field. So it happened so many times. I was in Daytona Beach, Florida. It happened again. I said, you know what? I don't know why, but this is a big problem, and I'm going to go study it. And so I took a year, and I put together dating groups all over the country, and I researched the problem. And I found out, yes, there are reasons why people who want to be in a relationship or want to be dating aren't, and that's kind of where the book came from. But one of those, and it was a big one out there, he's since recanted, but somebody wrote a book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye, that went through the Christian world that made dating kind of a poo-poo thing and said that you ought to just wait and let God do this for you. Well, I don't know how many of you got your job that way. I don't know how many of you were lying on your couch, watching ESPN, and Vintage came and knocked on your door. You found your church in a different way, and everything else in life. So there's a theology of God is involved and God will provide. So I wanted to start with that. So I'll tell you one more story and then a few points about that. And then what I really want to do is I wanted to open it up. I wanted this to be more of an interactive time. I was doing an event in Cincinnati, and the event team, it'd be like the team here the night before, we're all planning and working. And so we're out to dinner, and one of the women said something about, they're talking about life and all that. She goes, well, I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing now at this age. And she was like 32. I said, really, what would you think you'd be doing? She said, well, I thought I'd be married and have kids by now. I said, oh, yeah, well, sometimes that happens. She goes, but God hasn't chosen that for me. I said, what? She said, well, I thought I'd be married and have kids by now, but God hasn't chosen that for me. And I said, well, how do you know that God hasn't chosen that for you? Because this got my kind of theology ears perked up a little bit. And the other thing was, I knew her pretty well. There's probably some guys that weren't choosing her either. She had some issues. But she's saying it's God, right? So I'm kind of coming defender of God. He's getting blamed for this. And so I said, what do you mean, God? And she said, well, that's what the Lord does. He finds the person you're supposed to marry, and he brings that person to you. And I said, I believe that, but how do you know he hasn't brought 5 of them and you don't have the eyes to see? He talks about that a lot. How do you know that he's brought 5 of them and maybe you were behaving in a way, because she was a little tough. And you kind of chased them away or engaged their better judgment. How do you know that's not it? And she goes, no, the Lord brings. I said, do you want to be in a relationship? She said, yeah. I said, how long has it been since you've had a date? And then you could see her whole demeanor change. You could see a little pain. And she said, 3 years. And I felt for her because there was really no reason for that. I mean, she's fun, she's intelligent, she's outgoing, she has so much to offer. And I said, you know what? I will be your dating coach. If you'll agree to this, I'll be your dating coach. And I guarantee you'll be dating in 6 months. She looks at me and she goes, fine. And she's kind of, And I said, but I require total obedience. You have to do everything I tell you. And if you don't, I'm done. She goes, fine. So we start out. So first thing I said was, which is the first idea of the book, the very first thing that I want you to do is I want you to surrender the thought that dating is about marriage. Now, that is the first big paradigm shift that I'm going to suggest to you today, because a lot of people, what they're doing is they're on a safari. They are. You know, you go to Africa to find the trophy, right? And you're seeing all these great animals, but you're passing them by because you're just looking for the one that's the trophy. Well, what happens is, a lot of times on that search to find the trophy, you're missing a lot of experiences on the way that would get you ready for the trophy, but not only get you ready, but also be able to see the trophy when you finally see them. And a lot of people put so much pressure on dating being about to find the one that they're not using the process of dating to mature them. And I truly believe, and I've seen this a gazillion times, that God uses the process to teach us what we think we want is maybe not what's good for us. You know, when I do events with adults on marriage, I say, how many of you married your prom date? Not too many hands go up. Because here's the second point about that. When somebody's looking for the one, another idea in the book, in the program is, and I go into great detail about this, is you have got to surrender your type. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't end up with your type, but it does mean that you've got to be humble enough before God to think that maybe your type isn't really your type, that type is built out of some kind of pathology. I've seen this 1,000 times. I was talking to a woman one time who, she had a very kind of dominating father, and she didn't really realize it, but she was, any kind of strength in a man would so turn her off, and she was really attracted to very gentle and, you know, kind of passive, ultimately passive men. Gentle is good, passive is not. But she learned by being frustrated so much by being attracted to men that she had to ultimately lead around in life, that she had to realize there's some things about how I've constructed my type that aren't that good for me. And we can build types and have triggers and everything. We move away from some or move towards another, and there's repetitive dynamics of things that are familiar. So I'm not saying that you won't marry your type in some kind of characteristics, but or get in a relationship with one. I'm just asking you to surrender it and be open to going out with anyone. And some of you just had a heart attack, right? But here's what I mean by that. And I'll go back to the story in a second. That the more experiences you have with a lot of different kinds of people, you are going to learn some things about what you really want and like in a person that you never even knew about before. That you go out on a date and you have a conversation and you find out, gosh, it's really interesting to go out with a guy that knows the alphabet. I've never really thought about that before. And you start to get this bigger picture than maybe your experience has been. Okay, so I want you to give up the idea that you're looking for the one from the beginning. And then the second thing about that is, like I told Lily, and I can call her by name because the woman in the book, she's actually a dating coach now. I got to do her wedding about 1.5 years after that conversation. And she said, all right, so what do I have to do? And I said, all right, so here's the first thing I want you to, first of all, you got to give up that you're looking for a husband. I want you to learn how to date. And she said, well, I hadn't had a date in 3 years. Where am I going to find one? I said, well, I'm going to help. Here's what I want you to do. Every Friday, I want you to send me an email with 5 names of 5 new guys that you have interacted with that week. 5 new guys. No recycling old inventory. Okay? 5 new guys. 5 new guys. Every Friday, I want their names. And I want them to have had enough interaction with you to want to ask you out. If they so were that crazy. I mean, if they so wanted to. But enough of an interaction. She goes, I haven't had a date in 3 years. Where am I going to find 5 in a week? I said, did I say anything about a date? She goes, you just said 5 names a week. That's all I said, 5 names. I don't care if you never go out with a 5. I just want to know if you can talk to them. Somebody you don't know. And in a way where that is engaging. She said, where am I going to find them? I said, I don't care. Starbucks, 7-Eleven. She said, I'm not going to go out with him. I said, I didn't go out. Say you go out. I just want to see if you can have an interaction. So she gets on the program. She starts, sending me the 5 names. So about week 3, it's late Thursday night. It's probably 10 o'clock or so. My phone rings. And it's her. She goes, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I'm having a panic attack. And I said, you're having a panic attack? She says, yeah, I can't breathe. So I kind of walk her through the panic attack thing, and then she gets okay. And so I said, what is going on? She said, well, I'm at this singles thing at this church, and I only have 4 names this week. Tomorrow's Friday, and there's a book table. So I walked up to the book table, and she said there was this really cute guy there. And so I walk up next to him, and I said, so do you know anything about this book? And she said, yeah, I was just starting a conversation. And so we started talking. She said, I started having a panic attack. I said, well, what were you thinking? She said, I wasn't thinking anything. We were just talking about the book. I said, no, you can't have a panic attack without thinking something. What were you thinking? She said, nothing. I was just thinking about the book. I said, Lily, what were you thinking? She goes, okay, you really want to know what I was thinking? I said, what? She said, I was talking to him, and all I could think about is how big my butt is right now. Literally, that's what she said. I said, seriously? Well, tell me about that. I mean, not how big, but tell me about your thoughts. And so she starts talking. She said, I said, tell me about your feelings about your body. And we started talking, and I said, do you remember when you first started to feel that way? And she starts telling me about her older brothers who would body shame her and bully her, and she's always had these feelings about her body. And without going into too much, depth psychology here, but what ended up happening was I put her in a group to go through some stuff about healing her body image and some of the woundedness that had come vis-a-vis her brothers, which now is transferring to men. And literally, once I started to watch her, when she would get around men, she would kind of morph into a different person. Now, I'm telling you this story because as she got healed in that area and she started being much more comfortable, much more open, much more engaging, she could be great with her friends, but when she got around a guy that she was interested in or liked, things began to shut down because there was woundedness there. Now, what happens a lot of times, there are many, I remember she told me, she said, I'm seeing this all over the place. She said, my girlfriend and I went to a gathering, And we were talking to these guys, and she goes, and she's so cool, and she's beautiful, and all of this, and they're kind of ignoring her. They're not really talking to her. And she said, I started to watch her, and she's so different around guys than she is with us. And so I tell you that part of this to tell you this, that, and I'm not blaming anybody for, if your dating life isn't working. There's a million different causes, some of them internal, some of them external, some of them God's sovereignty. I mean, God does play a role in this. He just isn't the only role. But there are a lot of times when things have to be healed on the inside in order to be attracted to the right kind of people, and in order for people to see the real you that may be hiding behind some anxiety and some fear. So, one of the things I would tell you, a quick other example. How many of you women have ever had the experience where you start dating a guy and then you're doing something pretty normal, like maybe wanting him to, I don't know, talk? Or maybe call every now and then or something. But you're making you're wanting him to show up in some way. And then he starts to say, well, you're so demanding and so needy and so, I'm feeling controlled. How many of you have ever had that experience? Okay. Well, let me tell you about that guy. This guy comes in to see me, and he said, I got to figure out if I'm going to marry and propose to my girlfriend. He said, but she's so controlling. And I said, well, what does she do? And really, she wasn't controlling at all. She would just make normal requests that a relationship requires. In fact, I started to say to him, I said, wow, that's, she wanted you to show up one day. It's really controlling. I think you ought to break up with her. He said, yeah, she's kind of immature. And I said, yeah, I don't know her, but I know she's not for you. And he said, why? And I said, because, women require things from men. I said, I think you ought to get a dog. He goes, what? And I said, because seriously, a dog, that. And then I thought about it. I said, no, a dog, you're going to have to get up in the middle of the night, sometimes let them out. They're going to wake you up. You got to feed them. That's way too controlling. How about a goldfish? That's the perfect one for you, I think. Now the point is, so we start to work with this. And he had a lot of stuff in his head. It didn't have anything to do with the women he dated. It had to do with some stuff, and, I don't want to sound too like a psychologist, but he had a very controlling mother in his head that he never had really separated from. And he kept his distance to ever feel like he had any autonomy. So I'm saying all this, the Lily story about our body, this guy, and in fact, as he worked through that, ultimately this woman came along who was much more assertive and stronger than the ones he had ditched before, and he totally fell in love, and they got married, and they're still married. But he could finally see her as making a request and not like she was controlling. So here's the point. Finding the right relationship, or finding any relationship, is an internal spiritual growth journey where you're learning more about yourself. God is going to teach you more and more about yourself. But you're also learning more about the outside world and what you really want and need. And one of the things, I wish we had, all day on this, but one of the things that I would want you to really, 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 especially if you're dating, you start to get serious, I want you to really, really look at the issue of trust. If you go back a few weeks, you could see I just released a book on trust, and I spoke on it at Vintage a few months back, I think. I want you to think about the 5 elements in that outline of trust before, as you're dating. See, dating is about shopping in some way, but it's also about fun. It's just a great sport. I mean, you get to go out to dinner and a movie or go to, hiking or something, and it's a human interaction that has a lot of great value to it. And one of my rules for Lily is I want you to always be going out with 5 at a time. I want 5 active cases. She goes, I said, absolutely. Look, and I don't mean in a relationship. I mean kind of, a few dates and going out. So I go, I want you to pick one that stands out in a crowd. But it's easy to stand out in a crowd of 1. And that's what a lot of people do. First one comes along, they just, pull in all the lines. They caught a fish. And then they instantly are kind of exclusive, or they get kidnapped or whatever, and it takes a while. Seriously, it takes a while to break out of that prison. So what I'm a proponent of is having an active dating life. And remember, if you're not looking for the one, you're not going to have to marry that guy. You're just going to Starbucks. You're just going to lunch. You're just going on a walk. Just have a life that's active. Now, the other thing is, you got to get your numbers up. We went to, I think it was Indianapolis, doing an event, and oh my gosh, I couldn't believe this. And I can tell you her name is Maureen, because we actually challenged her. We used to have a syndicated radio show. It was a daily call-in show across the country. And she was part of that team, and we went to do an event. And at the time, she was late 30s, and just so smart. She had been really successful in business, really beautiful, really funny. We all loved her. And so we get in late, the whole team in Indianapolis. Our planes are late. We got to have food. The only place open is Hooters. It's like 11 at night. And so we all go to Hooters to get some food. And so she and I are sitting there, and we're just talking. I said, so what's going on? I haven't talked to you in a while. I said, are you dating anybody? She goes, no. I said, why? She said, I don't know. I haven't had a date in I think she also said 3 years. I said, Maureen, that's pitiful. She said, what do you mean? I said, that's just ridiculous. You're too, come on. We got to do something about this. She said, I'm open. I said, all right, you're working the program. Okay? I said, but this time, I'm going to bring you on the air and interview you each week, and you're going to have an audience of a few million people holding you accountable. And so we walked through the process. About a year and a half later, John Townsend and I did her wedding. But she did all this on the air. But I'll never forget, when we brought her up on the stage, she had just got engaged, and I said, Maureen, when I told you to get your numbers up, and that's easy to do once you realize you never have to see a bunch of these guys again in your life, right? Seriously, you're not making any commitments. You're going for a walk. I said, so she joined a service, and that was one of the ways that she got her numbers up. And then she, started dating. I said, how many dates did you go out on? How many new guys did you go out with through the dating service before you found Jeff? She said, I can tell you. And she opens up her phone and she starts scrolling through. Guess how many it was? 61. Get your numbers up. Okay? Anyway, so in summary, I know there's a lot. You can't do a lot in a short amount of time, but I think what I want to get across is this, that if you can put dating into, I just want to meet people. I'm not looking to fall in love on this lunch. I'm not looking for my life partner. I'm going to have a meaningful interaction with a human being where we get to know something about each other and have fun and some laughs and talk about God or physics or something. And that's part of life anyway. But if you start to do that more and more, and you're not, because what happens with singles, they go to work, they say they see the same 6 people every day, then they come home, they see their roommate, Saturday they go hiking or biking or run errands, and then Sunday they go to church. Where are you going to get your new numbers? See the traffic patterns. So we have to look at that problem. So that, I want you to look at the internal issues that may be having you avoiding being assertive in relationships, or avoiding being vulnerable or being open, all that kind of stuff like she had to go through. And in my experience, once people begin to work on the outside strategy and the internal issues, and they gain experiences, then we see magical things happen. And I'm not kidding when I tell you, I wrote this book, and I wasn't going to write a book, but I was talking on it one time, and my publisher happened to be in the audience and said you have to write this. I wish I had counted the numbers. It's got to be in the thousands if you include emails, but I know it's in the hundreds when I'm out speaking across the country, where a man and a woman will walk up to the book signing table, hold up their rings, and say, "The book." They were both reading it, and they just started to, because all it does is tell you to do normal human stuff. And a lot of times, some churches, the last thing they want singles doing is normal human stuff. They just get some weird teaching. So anyway, there's my weird teaching. Feel free to evaluate it.